Okay, let's get started then. Since we're already 3 minutes in, we've got about 4 students in the audience, and today, it's my pleasure to introduce Elise Thorsen and Beach Gray, who are Pitt alumni. They both did their PhDs in the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures, and did certificates with REEES, and are currently working for, it's no longer Nvetta Analytics, right? It's a new name.
Yes, Nvetta was acquired by Accenture Federal Services, which is even more exciting opportunities for our students who are here today. So,
okay. Well, with that, I'll turn it over to both of you to talk a little bit about your backgrounds, the work you do, and then we'll open it up to questions. So, floor is yours.
And I can share my screen. Actually, I have a PowerPoint.
Oh, awesome.
At least if you want to start us off here.
okay.
You have okay, I'll make you a co-host here.
Oh,
it works. Okay, good.
There we go. Let's go to slide 0.
okay, yes.
All right. Beach Gray and I are here today to give you a bit of an introduction to a part of government affiliated business that you might not be aware of. We're within the contracting area where we are adjacent to the government, and I think that there's a lot of exciting things to learn about, a lot of exciting aspects to being in this area because it's very fast moving. And I did not look at myself. It's very fast moving, and it's been a really interesting experience being one of the first sort of sets of responders to the current crisis. But it's also been really interesting to build the groundwork for being able to respond quickly in times of crisis and being able to leverage a lot of really smart people around us for that. So we're going to tell you a little bit about doing open source data analysis and doing big data work on foreign policy and security issues. So we can move on. And I think that this first slide is yours to start with, Beach.
Okay.
Of course. I didn't realize that we had this. So I'm a PhD, and I joined Nvetta in 2016, and I'm still here. So there we are. Go ahead, Beach.
Yeah, I'm Beach, and study with Elise in the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures, and we both got our PhD and decided to do something different with our lives. And I'll say 2 things, which is, if you're interested in getting a PhD or a master's, you should definitely do that, and things will work out later. And if you're not interested in it and you want to go directly into this world of, working for the government or contracting, then you don't need a PhD. It's certainly nice to have, but and it certainly gives you a different perspective, but you don't need to do that. So that's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say is that, we'll be interested to hear more about everyone's background when we have a question and answer session, but the world has changed, and, first and foremost, there's a tragedy of war for the Ukrainian people, and a tragedy of isolation and culpability for the Russian people. But you have a chance to hopefully make an impact, and the world is going to be different, and it's going to be a lot harder to go to Russia. And so if you've been to Russia or you've been to Ukraine or this part of the world, you have something that, people for the next few years might not have. So you are valuable from that perspective. Accenture is the company that bought Nvetta, which is the company that Elise and I worked for years. And they have about 10,000 employees, and then they are a company within a company. And the bigger company is called Accenture, which has a range of business type solutions, consulting, et cetera. But the reason that Accenture Federal Services is an independent company within the company is because it has to be based in the US, and the big Accenture is a multinational company. So I'll turn it over to you to describe a little bit about our job titles, Elise.
Yeah, so we are senior open source analysts. And the basic idea behind that is that an analyst can be all sorts of things. And analysts, but we'll start with the specific and then go to the general for what an analyst can be. Beach and I have been responsible for a long time for developing metrics to assess the impact of US messaging and also of Russian messaging, so insofar as we can detect it, with an eye to identifying opportunities and vulnerabilities for our government customer. And the way that we do this is we create data. We figure out how we can make data. We use bespoke taxonomies to allow us to point to specific topics and show how they are visible and present in the information environments that we're looking at. And having data is really very useful because it allows us to look at trends over time or to compare one set of information to another set of information. So how does Romania feel about NATO weapons going to, or NATO supplying weapons to Ukraine versus how does Hungary feel about that? Where we don't know how people feel, but we do know what expressions people are exposed to in those countries. We're not doing polling. So we can provide data-driven insights about where you might want to spend your time. If you want to improve on what's already good, you can go to Romania. If you want to really try to till the barren ground, you can go to Hungary and see if you can get a little bit more enthusiasm going. But the important thing is that we are providing information for planning, and then we're providing information afterwards about how you're doing. And this, we're talking about the information environment in Europe because that's where we're working, but this could be expanded to all sorts of things. It's basically being an analyst is curating data, making sure that you're getting good data and interpreting it for a customer who has specific questions about how they're doing and where they're going. So that's, I guess that's going into analysts too, but Beach, if you want to take over.
Yeah. At least you just said it perfectly, which is that you're curating the data, you're making sure you have good data, and you're interpreting it. You're not just saying something and looking for the data to back it up. The data is driving the project, but it has to be well curated and taken care of, and make sure that you have a sample that is large. You make sure that it has been curated with as little bias as possible. And so all of the courses that you've taken with REEES and, in your undergraduate experience, this is when that comes to play. This is when critical thinking becomes important. The writing that you did, the research papers becomes important, and your unique ability to understand the region, the mentality of the people in the region. This is where all of those things that you've been learning really come to bear, and it's kind of the background knowledge and intelligence and wisdom and discernment that guides you, and so you have these skills. It's just a matter of applying them with something new, which is a data set. But everything that you've been learning hasn't been for naught. You read Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, and you did a lot of things, and those things develop skills that are now relevant. Do you want to go on to open source, or am I continuing for the whole slide, Elise? Can you hear me?
I think she froze.
Okay, she froze. Well, Elise, when you are able to come back, you can pick up. But open source just means, everything that is publicly available. And that used to be, kind of not as important as it is now. There's just a lot more information out there, and most of the most important information is actually open source. Obviously, there's classified information, and there are different reasons why things might be classified. Usually has to do with weapon systems or planning, or the things of governments that foreign governments that are sharing with the U.S. But a lot of the most important information, as we're seeing with this conflict, is out there in the open, and it's not always accessible to everyone. We know that Russia is clamping down on its media environment and social media and creating a firewall. But there is a lot of information, and if you can synthesize that information and pick out what's important, it's extraordinarily valuable to decision makers. So that's what we're doing. It's kind of a 21st century type of task, but it's a really exciting one. And then the senior part of this role just means that Elise and I have been entrusted to kind of move up the corporate ladder a little bit and have an opportunity to manage people, which in practice means going over the reports, guiding them, helping them on their own career path. So there's definitely a future in this type of career. You're not stuck in one place. Is Elise back on? I'm sorry, I can't see.
Not yet.
Okay.
Technical difficulties there, but yeah.
Okay, I can just continue on, and if you have questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Let me. Okay. So, what exactly are we doing? There are several ways to do analysis, several ways to collect information, but one thing that we do is we look at all of the media outlets of record. Something like the digital version of the New York Times, but for Russia, and we do a lot of those media outlets. And for other projects, and for this project, we look at social media. We look at, depending on the project, we might look at academic articles. We might look at, university websites. We can look at anything that's out there and publicly available. And so we bring in everything, and we have the ability to do that because of the computing power that we now have with cloud and other technologies. And then we curate that, which means we add metadata to it, and we look at it at the article level, articles that are relevant to us, that might be about the conflict in Ukraine, and then we go even deeper into the article and look at quotes. So when somebody is quoted, either directly or indirectly, and we can look at that and use humans, but also machine learning and artificial intelligence to get at the patterns and communication strategies, the sentiment. Is this reflecting well on the U.S., poorly on the U.S.? Is this pro-Russian? Is this pro-Ukrainian? Is this kind of just neutral? And then from there, we can start to ask the really big questions, which is, who is visible and where? How often is, Putin being quoted in Russian media as opposed to European media? Is he being quoted more now than he was in European media than he was before the conflict? So when you have that data, you can interrogate it in all sorts of interesting ways and begin to ask big questions. And the key thing is that when you have data over time, you can compare it, right? So what does 23% mean? Is that a lot or a little? It depends, on the context. If you're talking about literacy rate, it's not very good. But if you're talking about something else, it could be significant. So that's the power of the data. Is something happens and you say, was this a big event or not? How does, what's going on now in the coverage compare to, for example, the tensions in March and April of the previous year? Or how does this event in terms of European media attention compare to the US withdrawal from Afghanistan in the summer? And so you can really put your finger on kind of a proxy for how people are interpreting this information or taking this information in, right? It's not a survey, but it is a proxy for how things are being consumed and thought about. Okay, this sort of, we talked about this last year. We did a similar thing last year with Trevor. And, I'm sure you've heard a lot about disinformation and misinformation. And it's more relevant now than ever, right? And the key differentiation or the key difference that you should all be aware of is between misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is just bad information. People might be repeating it, and it's circulating and it's just wrong, but there's no necessarily malicious intent behind it. It's, if you do this, you can cure yourself of COVID, or, any sort of information that's just not accurate and is being circulated. It's not being fact checked, but, and obviously that's a problem. We saw that with COVID, false cures and so forth. So obviously that is a societal problem. It's something to fix, but there's no necessarily malign intent. Disinformation, there's usually there's a malicious actor, often a state actor, and you're trying to mislead audiences or undermine confidence and trust. So either put out something that's just wrong or just kind of create chaos in the media environment so people don't know what to think, what's right and what's wrong. So clearly, disinformation, we have a lot of examples in Ukraine and Russian Kremlin-backed media outlets. We know that they have said that the US and Ukraine have developed bioweapons, and there's biolabs and chemical and biological weapons. And we know that that is false, and we know that that's a narrative that the Kremlin is putting out there. And the really scary thing is they might be putting it out there because every accusation is a confession, and it might be that they are planning to use chemical and biological weapons and say, oh well, Ukraine and the US was doing it first, so we were just countering that, or oh, the US is actually doing this, and Ukraine is actually doing the things that we are covertly doing. And so it could be to justify or to blame. So disinformation is really scary and really important to recognize. And then finally, and this is something that we deal with all the time, is just the manipulation of the information environment. So I'm sure you all have been following the news, and you know that the justification for the quote unquote special military operation in Ukraine, end quote, was to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine, which again is disinformation. Yes, there are kind of right-wing elements in Ukraine, but there are small, and if anyone is following the course of Adolf Hitler and trying to annex another country and invade and everything, then it's Putin. But the interesting thing that we've seen recently in the information environment is that officials are kind of moving away from using these terms, Russian officials. So that's kind of just a manipulation. They will put at the end of articles that, this was on February 24th, Putin said this as the invasion happened. But they're not saying those terms anymore. So they're just kind of slowly transitioning into maybe phasing that out. And it's not really, if you're just if you're just repeating your lies less, is that really, the same as a straight disinformation or misinformation? It's just, a different layer that it's important to pay attention to and keep our government customers aware of. At this point,
At this point, I can probably talk about myself.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know. I was staring at the screen, Elise. I didn't know that you came back on. I'll turn it over to you to speak for a bit.
Yeah. So clearly lots of exciting things to watch for. It's not always, sometimes the very first thing you have to learn as an analyst is how to find these jobs in the first place. They're not recruiting from area studies centers in universities for a lot of these jobs. And so you don't have people who are necessarily pointing you at the openings. And one of the important things in order to find those openings is to start talking to people. So, and know what you're looking for. I had a slight sense that I was interested in doing this kind of quantification of very qualitative knowledge that we all have of Russia and Eastern Europe as fields of study. I was interested in how you could turn that into quantifiable information by virtue of taking courses with Dr. David Birnbaum and Dr. Nare Han in the Slavic department and linguistics department about computational methods in the humanities and computational linguistics. So I was learning about how you can do this kind of quantification of qualitative knowledge. And spring 2016, I'm about to graduate and I'm networking with my sister, who's much better at networking at these things than I am. And I'm very lucky that I had somebody who knew what she was doing, kind of showing me around. So the way that you avoid being in my position in 2016 and not knowing what you're doing is you start practicing as early as possible, practice everywhere. Practice talking about what does it mean to you when you hear a Russian literature PhD. And somebody said, I hear that you can do Russian and numbers because you've done this quantitative methods in the humanities thing. Even though it's humanities, I hear quantitative. And then one of these people who did say that, I hear that you're going to be working in a bank because you've got Russian and numbers. And I was like, no, I can't do banks. I don't know anybody in banks. This person called me later and said that there was a Russian subject matter expert position open that needed to be filled immediately because they just realized that basically Russia was totally winning the information operations game at that point in 2016. You might remember a certain election that was happening at that point that it was later shown to be true, or shown to be that Russia was attacking the US in the information environment and attempting to influence the outcome of the elections. Effectively or not, they were trying. And so really fast, it was not particularly formal as an onboarding, but sometimes you just have to be in the right place at the right time. And the way you're there is you are showing people that you're available. And Beach had a slightly different experience because they were looking to grow. And I'm going to let Beach talk about his experience with the same thing.
Thank you, Elise. And thank you, because you really did the hard work of getting into the this world. And I ended up getting, my network was through the Slavic department and Elise. But the thing that I think it's important to note is that, sometimes two things. Sometimes your friends and the people in your department that you study with can be the best contacts. And the other thing is that, I showed interest early, and I reached out to Elise in November just to kind of hear about her job and, kind of hear, how do you get into this world? And then I did another call, it's called an informational interview. It's just kind of it's not a, hey, we're offering you a job. It's, hey, I saw that you have this cool job. I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to talk to you about it. And so I had a call with Elise's boss. And then he, it was a really great call. And then I said, well, if anything ever comes up, please let me know. And he said, I definitely will. And so I said, okay, whatever. I was looking at lots of different types of jobs at that point, and I was going through a lot of, sending out a lot of applications and talking to a lot of people and trying to network. And then in May 2017, this job that came up, and Elise reached out to me and some other colleagues and said, you might want to apply. So I did a round of interviews, and I got a job offer. And actually that summer, I was supposed to be the program director for Project Go in Narva, Estonia with REEES. And so I had to, everyone was super understanding. I felt bad because I had to leave and I had to take the job, but at the same time, they were able to find a great person, and everyone was super cool about it. But yeah, the point of the story is, it wasn't just, hey, obviously Elise had a big role in it, but there was a lot of other things that were going on. And, sometimes you talk to somebody and think nothing of it, and then it becomes important later on. So definitely, cast your net as broadly as possible, and always, take every conversation seriously, because, later something that doesn't seem significant becomes significant. Elise, do you want to add any additional lessons learned from your job search?
I think that doing informational interviews is what worked an awful lot with me. Talk to people. This is a really good example of talking to people, of meeting people who can be resources for you later. I can assure you that Beach and I are both super interested in talking to people who just want to learn more about what we do. And I, at least, am always really excited to brainstorm opportunities. I never have a job to offer, but I'm always really, once I had a job to offer, I haven't had many of those since then. It's a lot of fun to see where other people are going, and to build my own set of resources for who I can talk to about special particular issues of particular interest. It was a lot of fun, actually, this past month to catch up with someone who is now working in financial crime, there we go, and helping to uncover all of the oligarchs' assets that are very cleverly hidden in all sorts of ways, and to really expose the false companies and the companies inside of companies and the money laundering operations that go on. I really enjoyed catching up and learning about that from this colleague. And so I learned an awful lot from people too. It's a two-way street. So I just emphasize the networking, the informational interviews, talking to people and being interested in what they're doing. Believe me, you're just as interesting, and don't feel, and you're interesting first. And people always love to be asked what they do and what they're about themselves. It's just human nature. So ask a good question and listen carefully, and you will have a friend, or at least an ally, for a good while. So that's what I pick out of the lessons learned here, Beach, if you want to pick your favorite lessons.
Yeah, that's great. I love the way you framed it, that you are interesting and people like to talk about, their work. So, just have as many of these informational interviews as you can. There's going to be a lot of dead ends. There were some dead ends for me, some jobs I didn't get, some opportunities I didn't get. And at the time I was disappointed, but I've been very, satisfied with my career path up to this point. And so, just kind of roll with the punches and expect that it's going to be a numbers game, and spreading your network as broad as possible, and just kind of have a thick skin, and be an optimist, but kind of a pessimist when it comes to the job market. But your skills are valuable, and they're needed now more than ever. So this is a good time to be getting a job. It's a bad time for the people of Russia and Ukraine, but a great time to be finding a job. It's just getting in contact with the right people, with the right companies.
Yeah, I'll note that even though it feels like right now, in terms of information environment monitoring, it feels like things are calming down. Like there's some predictability in what things are going to be like. Russia's not moving very far forward any given day. And so on the one hand, it feels like things are calming down in my shop for the first time in a long time. So I'm really glad for that. And on the other hand, there are a lot of long-term commitments that the US has made to Europe and to Ukraine that include managing people flow. There's refugees. There are people who aren't refugees but are displaced. There's compliance with sanctions. There is all sorts of work that is going to need to be done, and on the security side too. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it really makes a big difference. And I think that there's going to be a demand for our skills for a long time to come. If I were going to add one thing to this job search lesson, is when you are advertising yourself, I hope that you advertise yourself as Area Studies Plus. That plus could be quantitative skills. It could be, I don't know, finance. It could be whatever it is that you happen to have a secondary interest in. But it's usually helpful to say, I have a hard skill of a language and some awareness of a more globally applicable skill. So that would be my last lesson learned there.
Awesome. Is that the last slide?
It is indeed.
Okay.
We have our contact information, which maybe we can send to you, Trevor, just in case people don't have it or aren't writing it down.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. That was really interesting, really informative. We already have a question for one of the students. That's just what I was going to ask. So Alex asks, is there an OCC code?
I don't know.
Oh, wait a minute. Alex, is this because you want to add this to your, yeah, I'll send you the code later. Okay.
If you don't have any questions, I'd love to hear about the students who are here, who are otherwise very informative black boxes, and I love them. I love you all, but
yeah, don't be shy.
I could start.
No shade here, but yeah, love to hear about you all.
So, hey everyone, I'm Yash, and currently at the Bradford campus, University of Pittsburgh, Bradford campus. And I'm a sophomore going to junior, and I have a major in computer science, computer information systems, and then a minor in business management. And so going forward, I was really interested in data analytics and then just understanding how data works, because in today's generation, I mean, just how the world's moving, data has been a really key part. And I think understanding how it flows and maybe learning skills to analyze it and then make some quantitative analysis off of it would be a great skill to have moving forward.
Yes. And it's not for this summer, but for next summer, consider applying, all of you should, but consider applying to internships. I think that the general cycle is at the beginning in the fall for data analytics type stuff, but that's definitely, that pinged my interest, piqued my memory that was something I meant to say, is that I don't know what the intern situation is like at AFS quite yet, but they're definitely going to want to bring in those kinds of skills, all these skills. Let's hear more about you all.
I can go. So I'm Jackie. Actually, I can turn on my camera, introduce myself. Hello. I'm Jackie. I'm a freshman. I'm going into my sophomore year next semester. I'm a computer science major with a minor in music. And my interests so far lie like in cybersecurity and like privacy stuff. I'm still very early on in like the whole like just like computer science journey, I guess. So I don't know exactly what it is I want to do, but cybersecurity has proved to be very interesting thus far. And so, yeah, this has been very interesting. So thank you guys for taking the time out of your day.
I don't want to keep speaking over Beach, but cybersecurity is definitely the bread and butter of everything we do at Central Federal Services Defense. We're like the outliers in terms of very area studies focused, but cybersecurity, very, very key. And the more you can, I don't know, that's a very smart place to be focusing. I'll just say that.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that even though our technology is getting better, it just leading to even greater cybersecurity challenges with ransomware, and there was a big data leak, I think, with this authenticator app recently. I'm sure you all heard about that. So, even though it seems like we should have solved all these problems by now, the problems are getting bigger, and your skills are going to be even more necessary in the years to come.
There's always the other way to go, where you've got hacking, exploiting a vulnerability in printers and basically hacking into them to print anti-war material on Russian printers until their ink ran out. It was a pretty fun episode last week. So there's always joining the black hats or the white hats or whatever they are. See, I know so much about cybersecurity.
I had a question as well, if it's okay. I'm a junior at Pitt, and my focus is philosophy, but I also study mathematics and French, and also statistics. So I was curious, so what kind of skills are required for the more diplomatic positions?
Well, since Beach and Elise, you don't really work in the diplomacy field, right?
Not directly, and we know people who are working in state, but I think that it's still more on the information distillation side than it is on the crafting messages side. That might be one of those cases where it is actually government as opposed to government adjacent, if you want to do that kind of work.
Alex, were you there for the conversation we had with Nina Murray, who's been in the Foreign Service for a long time?
No, I wasn't.
I would recommend watching that recording and maybe reaching out to her. She's got a lot of insight into getting into diplomacy, working for the State Department.
Okay. And do you know how I can find that? Is it posted online?
I think it'll be posted on the same website that you went to. This
Nina Murray, you said?
Yeah. I'll put it in the chat for you. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Christopher or Gianna, do you want to say anything?
Hi, I could talk. I'm Gianna. I'm a sophomore here at Pitt Bradford, and I'm actually a nursing major, but I was looking for certain topics to kind of like maybe branch off in or do like minoring. And so I was like, I heard from my professor that this was going on this week, so I thought I would take a listen and see what was going on. So yeah, I didn't have a question. I just
no, but oh my gosh, that kind of background. If you don't want to do it, if you want to take that kind of knowledge base into analysis, I think that the biometrics and just in terms of things that I've seen at AFS, there's a lot about AFS, and also if you want to talk about the government, about DHS, Department of Homeland Security, they worry about those kinds of biological, biometrics sorts of things a lot. And it would be, I'm gonna babble, so maybe while I collect my thoughts, Beach has something that he's nodding furiously.
Yeah, I would say that definitely, you know, data science, computer programming is something you might want to look into as a second, you know, as a minor, because AFS and other companies do some really crazy, cool science fiction-y type stuff, like using artificial intelligence to, you know, and machine learning to try to come up with, you know, like to try to solve problems before they become problems. Like if somebody wants to try to, they call it spoof, like you know, fake your fingerprints. So they try to come up with, you know, what would you put on your fingers to try to fake the fingerprint, and then let's build a machine that's gonna be able to detect that we're trying to fake the fingerprint. So there, it gets into really cool, like super interesting stuff. And, you know, nursing is certainly a noble profession, and my sister is a nurse, so I have a lot of respect for it. But it's not the only thing you have to do, and you can do it for a while, and then your knowledge of what hospitals in the industry need would be very much valuable. And then, you know, biometrics, as Elise is saying, is going to be a big field, is already a big field, and one that's only going to grow. So computer science, data science, if you have that inclination, definitely at least maybe like an overview course would be cool.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be everything, but some grasp of statistics would definitely have helped me a lot. And yeah, just all you have to do is be able to tick the quantitative analysis box. You don't have to be a quant, just be able to do it. And you're already well on the way there with a science background.
Other questions? Beach and Elise. Well, I've got one. What's your favorite and least favorite part of your jobs, your sort of day to day?
I'll let Beach answer the loaded question first.
I would say my favorite part of the job is that you're contributing to something, you're having an impact at a time when the world needs a positive contribution. And that hasn't always been, you know, so clearly cut in past US missions and work. I won't name specific things, but now is a time when it feels like we really are on the side of the good. So that contribution, however small, feels really good. The only thing I don't like is when I have to commute or deal with DC traffic. And so, you know, it's a great time. Fortunately, I've been able to be remote. I do have to go in the office about once a week, but now is just like a golden time, and you don't necessarily have to be totally remote. Hybrid is a good option because of networking, the importance of networking. But the now is a great time to be getting into a workforce when, you know, it's no longer the expectation that you commute in traffic, go to a job, 9 to 5, clock out, commute back. You have a lot more flexibility these days. So definitely something to take advantage of. And once again, you're valuable. So it's a bargaining chip. And if you have more than one offer, it's something to consider. Like, do you want to be remote? Do you not want to be remote? Some people like to just be in the office and have their personal and professional lives separate.
Nice speech.
I think my favorite part of the job that I'm doing right now is that pretty much every week or day's work or week's work is a little bit of a puzzle of you've got the following materials, you've got the following tools, and you've got a question that doesn't match the tools at all, but because it's a human being who's asking the question, not a computer, and it's translating that question into something that is legible to a computer. I don't do programming so much, but it's legible in numbers, and then taking everything that I know from all the work that I put into learning about Russia and learning about the former Soviet Union and investing it into explaining the results of the answer that I'm able to get. And so that entire process really just strikes me as a very fun, or at least compelling puzzle and it happens on a daily or weekly basis that I get to do that. I have to say the worst part is having that massive background of information that I keep adding to, because it's just a region that's important to me, Russia and the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. And nobody ever really wants to know that. It's really important. It informs everything, but nobody ever wants to know that excess information. So it's always just there being excessive. And I never know quite what to do with that. But I don't regret that it's there. It enriches my life. And if it's not important to people at work, it might be important in some other capacity. And so no regrets on that point. And it really, really enriches the work that I give, that I send out. So there we go.
Cool. Yeah, it is always one of these things you spend when you get a PhD, right? You have such depth of knowledge about something that will probably never see the light of day, or be of interest to anyone. And yet it enriches everything. It affects everything, right? I totally agree with that. Well, I guess we've got time for maybe a few more questions, but I was also wondering, like, how you see your field changing, particularly in response to the war, but just in general. I mean, like where are things going? I don't know. I suspect you have a lot of insight into what's happening, and I just want to hear your perspective. I just want to hear what you think of what's going on. I know that's a very sort of open-ended, vague question, but do whatever you want with it.
Take a whack at it, because it's something that I've really observed with interest over the past 5 or 6 years, is how much better we understand how information behaves than we used to. I just remember everything in 2016, when I went to ACES in November 2016, it was RT and fake news, and how do we avoid obviously fabricated news from infiltrating our information environments. And now it's so much more aware of how information acts and behaves, and how it behaves in personal networks and social networks and in institutions. And I'm thinking particularly about how we've really gotten a much better idea of how conspiratorial thinking works, especially after the past 5 years, and really just how much more it is about, it's an issue of information pollution, and not really about identifying obviously fake news so much as it is about mitigating the bad behavior of information. I'm not being particularly smart in this communication, and one thing that I would say is evidence of this progress, and I think that there's only going to be more progress in the future, is just how in the past 3 months, we saw the US government respond totally differently to Russian attempts to control the information environment. It was a lot of like the US took the first step in inoculating populations against the idea of false flag attacks. So Russia really didn't have any sort of moral advantage when it attacked Ukraine. It was just like, oh, I guess you're going to do it anyways for no good reason, as opposed to, oh no, the Ukrainians attacked the poor people of Donbass with chemical weapons. What are we going to do? And there was just a lot of understanding how these tactics work and being able to proactively get in the way. And proactive leaking of information. Leaks were very cannily used, for example, when it turns out that China asked Russia to delay its war, and that left China off balance in terms of entering into the information environment and all sorts of really interesting stuff. And I think that is only going to be better informed as we continue to use data science to identify how information acts and really get beyond just, oh, well, we found a random Twitter account that had some fake news on it. Let's highlight that and give it air. So that's my first thought, is just we have such a better idea of how it all works now, and it's only going to get better. So that was a long response. I hope that Beach had a chance to maybe compose a better reply.
I would just totally agree with that and say the fact that the official justification for the invasion of Ukraine was denazification and demilitarization, and it wasn't, oh, Ukraine attacked us or something along those lines, shows that even though it still happened and that's a huge tragedy, it was the whole world saw, okay, this is just raw aggression. Like denazification, are you crazy? You know that Zelensky is Jewish, the president. So it was just so there was a success, and I definitely agree with Elise that there was progress in understanding the information environment. At the same time, I think we are headed for an information arms race. I think that deep fakes are going to get far more sophisticated, but at the same time, to combat things like deep fakes and false information, there's going to be more, ways of authenticating real content, real news, using things like blockchain. So there's going to be more false information that's harder to detect, but there are going to be better tools to detect that false information. But it's gonna always be like this, and that's why I think for the people in the audience, like I believe it was Jackie and Yash, who are interested in computer science, I think that you can see that your work is going to have a lot of impact and effect, and you should decide exactly what aspect you want to work on and what you're interested in, because there's a lot of really cool applications and you can do a lot of work for good. But this information warfare is only going to get more sophisticated, have more of a technological edge, and become more and more important for the fate of democracies and for authoritarian regimes, whichever way these things go, either to fight, or to crumble, or to uplift.
Right. Well, that's really fascinating. And I'm sure that we're going to keep our eyes on this. It's good to see that we're not just being so reactive all the time and like trying to undo bad information, but instead kind of getting in the fight. And I don't know. I've been amazed to see just how effective Ukrainians have been in this information war and like controlling the narrative, and that completely surprised me. But there's good cause for hope, and there's cause for concern, and who knows, right? but we got you out there, and you're doing the good work, and hopefully we'll have some of our other Pitt students joining the field. And we're out of time, but I just want to thank you both for speaking with us today and sharing your insight. It's been really interesting.
You're welcome, and I want to see Pitt representing as much as possible in this really interesting field. So don't let them pretend that it's all CMU or Harvard.
Okay.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. Well, bye everyone. Have a great weekend.